Okay, so today we're going to be looking at iLogic within Autodesk Inventor 2012. What iLogic allows you to do is create rules within your parts and assembly files, etc. So you can automate processes, start to drive standards with certain things, etc. So we're going to have a really straightforward example today which you can follow through, and hopefully this will show you the power behind iLogic and help you implement it into your designs. So I'm just going to start with a standard part, and once I'm in there I'm just going to create a basic two-sided rectangle, and then I'm just going to add a couple of dimensions. When you add your dimensions, we can specify names for the parameters against these dimensions. So to make this easier, once I'm inside iLogic, I'm just going to type width equals and then my my dimension. So what this does, essentially, this is the value of the dimension, so 100 millimeters, and then this section here is specifying what you want the dimension to be called. So it's going to create me a dimension with the name of width with the value of 100. I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the side, but for height. I'm just going to finish that sketch. I'm just going to go in now and extrude the shape. 10 mil is absolutely fine. Apply that. If you go up to your ribbon bar, onto the Manage tab, and go into your parameters. What you'll notice in here is that straight away now we've got these parameters with width and height as specified with the appropriate values. What I'm also going to do is add a user parameter in here. So I'm going to choose the drop down, add text. I'm going to call it choice. I'm going to right click, make it multi-value, write in square and rectangle, click add, then click OK. So as you can probably guess, what this iLogic rule that we're going to create today is going to do is it's going to give us the choice of whether to create a square or a rectangle, and it's going to automate the control of the part for us. It's a very simple example, but from it you'll be able to see exactly what iLogic can do and the idea behind it. So I'm now going to click done, and I'm going to my iLogic browser down here to create my first rule. Now if you don't have this, just go up to your Manage tab again in the ribbon and go over to iLogic and click on iLogic browser. It will appear as a floating window in the top left, but you can just literally drag and dock it into your browser on the left hand side. So I'm going to right click and add a rule. I'm going to leave it as default name for now, that's absolutely fine. I can always rename later. And this takes me into my iLogic edit rule dialog box. Really simply, we have on the left a browser which gives us all the commands, etc. we can control from within iLogic. We have a section on the top which shows us a browser of our part, gives us all the parameters within inside the model, any user parameters and all the features. And we have our coding area. Now if you're completely new to coding and you don't know anything about it, we have sections here where we can actually grab lumps of code and then just fill out the missing sections. So what we're going to do is just write a basic if statement based on our choice parameter. So from this drop down list I'm going to choose the if then end if and drop that in. I'm just going to double click where it says my expression, and then this is where I'm going to add in my code. So I'm going to say if this parameter, so simply double click on choice, equals, open speech brackets and type square, then do the following. And all we're going to do under there is just put a couple of carriage returns. I like to put a couple of spaces in as well just to make it easy to read. Go at the top, select model parameters. I'm going to say if the choice equals square, then the width equals the height. Very, very simple. So if you choose square from the drop down list, it automatically takes the width dimension and matches that to the height dimension, therefore creating a square. I'm going to drop back and just type in else. What that means is if the choice is anything else, So if it's anything other than square, so if it's rectangle, in other words, the width equals the height times 2. Put a couple of spaces in there again, makes it a little bit easier to read. Then the if statement ends. I'm just going to click OK. That takes me back into my part, and now the important thing to do is go over to our event triggers. So again, on the ribbon bar, under Manage, under iLogic, we have event triggers. I'm going to go in there, just going to go down to any model parameter change, highlight that, click Select Rules, and then select the rule that we've just written. So what that means is whenever a parameter changes within this model, it's going to run rule 0. So with a little bit of luck now, if we go to our parameters, change our parameter here, and you should see in the background the model starts updating. So really nice, really quick, really easy. I'm just going to leave that on rectangle. We can then take this a step further. If we go down to our iLogic browser, we notice that we have a Forms section. So if I go into my Forms, right click, add a form, this allows me to create a front end where to control this from. So what I'm going to do on there is add this, our user parameter here, so click, drag, hold, click, hold and drag, sorry, drag that into the right hand side, and I'm also going to put in there the controlling height as well, because if you remember from the rule, everything is controlled from that height. Get a little preview over here. So this is what our form's going to look like. We can go as far as to add groups, pictures if we want to. So we could say, okay, we'll put a picture up there. If you wanted to, you could have your company logo. You can group, you can add tabs, labels, etc. So you can really get a nice professional looking form up. I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just add another simple rule. Right click, add rule, just call this rule 1. And this rule is going to essentially say when the file starts, show the form. So I'm just going to go to the left hand side, expand forms, double click, show form. It does everything else for me. So it's going to say iLogic form.show and then the name of our form in there, which is obviously what we specified earlier. Click OK. Perfect. Go up to our event triggers. We can say after open document, select rules, rule 1. So what that will do is when we open this document in the future, it will automatically bring up this form. Excellent. So the way this form works, without having to go into parameters, we can change our choice parameter, and we can also change our height, like so. To take this a step further, we could perhaps say that we want to add some overrides in there as well. So if we go down to our rules, double click rule 0 to edit this rule, we can start adding a little bit more detail in there to make this do a little bit more for us. What we need to do before we go on actually is just go into parameters and create ourselves a new text parameter called override. Again, right click and make it multi-value. Yes, no. Click add, click OK. Double click rule 0. So what we can do right at the start is say if my override value equals no, then it's going to run the if statement that we've already specified. so. Else, so if it equals yes, it's obviously going to take in whatever those parameters are. So as a matter of fact, we don't actually need the else, we can just say end if. Click OK, that's just going to check the code for us, make sure it's all right. Go into our forms, right click and edit our form. It's going to drag over the width, click OK, open that form up. Obviously go back in, edit. You need to also add the override in there as well. So when the override is on no, it's going to run our rule. When we are on override, this doesn't have any effect, and I can change these values to whatever I may want to. Obviously if you then turn override back on or off, it's automatically going to get that rule and put it into effect. So the last thing that we want to do is maybe add, start driving a standard in here. So I'm going to go back to rules, double click rule 0, and we're just going to edit this, and between these two end ifs, so we're still within the overall if statement. So if the override is no, then run our initial rule based on the square and rectangle choices. If override is yes, what we're going to do is allow the user to enter everything they want to, unless they enter, say, over 200 millimeters. Say that we want to drive a standard and that's not physically possible. So we're going to go in here and say else, and we'll say if the height is greater than 201, then we're going to show a message box. Double click. So again, you just expand the section over here that you want and double click the feature. So we're going to show a message box which says the message invalid entry. Title might be incorrect. So what that's going to do is allow the user to specify any dimension for height up to 200 millimeters, and then it won't allow. So we show the message box and then default the height to 200 millimeters. End that if statement. I'm just going to copy and paste it. And just change to width. That looks all okay. Click OK, that's just going to check the code, that's fine. So just to explain what's just happened is we have this is our lump of code. So we've got if the override is no, it's going to run this section. Else, so if it's anything else, it's going to run this section. So hopefully now, if I bring up my form, just revert these back to slightly smaller size. So with override off, everything's working as expected. If I turn override on, again, we can add things in. As soon as we try and go over 200 millimeters, we get our error message pop up saying invalid entry, must be 200 millimeters or less, and it automatically reverts to the maximum value. So obviously within this you can specify maximum values for your designs, start driving a standard within there, so it's physically impossible to go in and change this to anything that it shouldn't be. We could go on and on if we wanted to. I'm going to leave it at that for today, because obviously the amount of detail there is within iLogic is huge. It's a very, very clever feature, very useful. Recommend that you all start having a look at it and start implementing it into your designs where possible. Should save you an awful load of time. Check back soon. We're going to put together some slightly more in-depth stuff on iLogic, which should be useful for you, so the next step on where you would go from here. But hopefully that's been useful and given you an insight of how you can start using iLogic within your designs. Check back soon.